I'll tell you a story. But not just any story. This one still keeps me up at night. Because once you hear it, you'll never look at the badge, the gun, or even the quiet suburbs the same way again. It began on a summer evening in a small American town where people still left their doors unlocked, where Friday night football was sacred, and where the police station was supposed to be the safest place in the city. But that night, a racist cop pulled the trigger on a teenage girl who couldn't even hear the sound of the gunshot, a deaf child, and in seconds, everything flipped upside down, because what he didn't know was who her mother was. Before I continue, make sure to watch till the end, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories like this. Her name was Ava Carter, 16 years old, bright smile, soft curls that framed her face, and though she couldn't hear a single word the world threw at her, she had learned to read lips so well, you'd swear she was catching every secret. She loved sketching. She carried a worn leather journal everywhere, pages filled with drawings, trees, hands, faces, pieces of a world she observed in silence. But more than anything, Ava loved dance. She'd stand barefoot in her room, place one hand against the stereo, and let the vibrations guide her steps. Her body moved to a rhythm she could never hear, but always felt. That night, she was walking home after practice, backpack swinging lightly on her shoulder, earbuds in. Not because she could hear the music, but because it made her feel less out of place. And then came the flashing lights. Officer Bradley King, a name people in town whispered about, but never challenged. A 10-year veteran of the department. Stocky, sharp jaw, shaved head, and a chip on his shoulder big enough to crush anyone who dared cross him. He didn't like being questioned, didn't like being corrected, and he sure as hell didn't like people who didn't fit into his picture of America, especially not young black teenagers walking alone at night. King pulled his cruiser beside Ava, rolled down the window, and barked something at her. She froze, because she couldn't hear him. She glanced up, lips moving silently, trying to piece together what he said. King grew irritated. "Hey, I'm talking to you." But Ava couldn't read his lips from inside the dark car. She did the only thing she could. She signed. Her hands moved in a language that gave her freedom, American Sign Language. King's face twisted. He didn't understand. He thought she was ignoring him, mocking him. He yanked the door open, stepped out, and barked again, louder. She flinched, shook her head, pointed her ears, mouthing the words slowly. "I'm deaf." But he didn't care. To him, her silence wasn't disability. It was defiance. What happened next was less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds that would destroy a family. 10 seconds that would expose the rotten cracks in a police station. And 10 seconds that would turn an ordinary night into an international story. King reached for his holster. Ava saw the sudden movement, panic rushing through her veins. She tried to step back, hands raised high, journal slipping from her grip and falling into the grass. But King's voice thundered. Stop resisting. She wasn't resisting. She was begging. And then, bang, the bullet ripped through her shoulder, knocking her to the ground. She didn't hear the shot, didn't hear her own scream, but she felt the heat, the tearing pain, the warm pool spreading beneath her. Her hands still moved in desperation. "Please, I can't hear. I'm deaf. I'm deaf." King didn't stop. He pressed his knee into her back, cuffed her with brute force, and spat words only he could hear. Another thug off the streets. By the time they dragged Ava to the station, bleeding and terrified, her phone had already been buzzing, because Ava's mother always knew when something was wrong. Her name was Elena Carter, and you don't forget Elena Carter. To the neighbors, she was just another suburban mom. Tall, poised, dark hair tied back with the neatness of discipline. But beneath the calm exterior was a storm most people would never survive. Because Elena wasn't just any mother. She was CIA. Years of covert operations. Years of secrets, weapons, and extraction missions that never made the news. And she'd walked through enough war zones to recognize the silence before an explosion. That night, when Ava didn't check in, Elena's instincts screamed. She opened her tracking app, saw her daughter's phone pinging at the police station, and felt her chest tighten. Then came the call. "Ma'am, your daughter's been detained." Detained. That single word was enough to send Elena Carter into a fury no one at that station was prepared for. It was past midnight when the glass doors of the station swung open. 2 women entered. One was Elena, eyes sharp, posture rigid, hands curled into fists she hadn't unclenched since the call. The other was her mother, Ava's grandmother, the one person who had taught Elena what it meant to stand tall in the face of injustice. Silver hair, deep lines of wisdom, but fire in her eyes that hadn't dimmed in 70 years. Together, they were unstoppable. The air shifted when they walked in. Officers glanced up, then quickly backed down, sensing danger but not yet understanding it. Elena's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Where is my daughter?" Inside a holding cell, Ava sat slumped against the wall, her shirt soaked in blood. She was pale, trembling, lips cracked, eyes wide with pain and confusion. She signed weakly through the bars, but no one paid attention. No one, except the one officer who looked away, ashamed. He knew this wasn't right, but his silence was safer than truth. At the front desk, King smirked when he saw Elena. "You must be the mom. Your kid was resisting. You people never learn." Elena didn't flinch, didn't blink. She stepped closer, her voice steady but deadly. "Open that cell. Now." King laughed. "Lady, this is a police station. You don't give orders here." But what King didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that the woman standing in front of him had given orders in war zones. Orders that had decided whether men lived or died. And she wasn't about to let a racist cop decide her daughter's fate. When I tell you the room froze the moment the chief walked out, I'm not exaggerating. Chief Warren Douglas. Broad shoulders, thinning hair. The kind of man who looked like he hadn't smiled in years. He'd built his reputation on being tough on crime. But behind the medals and speeches was a man who had turned a blind eye to the worst of his officers. He stepped into the lobby, glared at Elena like she was a trespasser in his kingdom, and growled. "What's going on here?" Elena didn't back down. Her voice was low, steady, and sharp enough to cut glass. "Your officer shot my daughter, a deaf child. And if you don't open that cell right now, Chief, I will expose every single thing you've been hiding, starting tonight." The chief smirked, like he'd heard angry parents before. But he had never stood across from someone who once interrogated war criminals in secret bunkers overseas. Elena stepped closer. "You think this is your house?" "No, this is mine now, and you're to give me the keys." The grandmother, fist planted firmly on the desk, added, "Don't you dare test her. I taught her everything she knows about standing up to bullies. And you, sir, are nothing but a bully in a badge." The tension snapped like a live wire. Behind the chief's desk, a nervous officer shuffled papers. Elena's eyes caught it instantly, the report. The words resisted arrest. Non-compliant. Aggressive behavior. A lie. And worse, no mention of Ava being deaf. No mention of her hand signing. Just the same recycled excuse officers had used for years. I feared for my safety. Elena's blood boiled. She leaned across the desk, snatched the report, and tore it in half. "You think you can erase her with paperwork," she hissed. "Not tonight." The chief stiffened. "That's evidence. Evidence of your corruption." Elena cut in. Her voice echoed through the station. and for the first time, some of the younger officers glanced at each other. Doubt flickered. Not everyone in that building was rotten, but silence had kept them complicit. Not anymore. Elena demanded the footage. The chief hesitated. King crossed his arms, smug as ever. Body cam malfunction. Happens all the time. Elena's laugh was cold, humorless. Malfunction? No, you shut it off. She had studied men like him her entire career. The way their eyes darted. The way their hands clenched when truth hovered too close. She knew he was lying, so she leaned in close enough for only him to hear. You have no idea who you're playing with. I've taken down entire regimes for less than this. And if you think you can bury what you did to my daughter, I will bury you. The grandmother, never one to whisper, raised her voice for the whole station to hear. If you're so proud of what you did, show the tape. Or are you cowards hiding behind your badges? That was the crack. Murmurs rippled across the room. One young officer, shaky but brave, spoke up. Chief, the footage is still in the system. I saw it upload before the report. The chief's face darkened. King's smirk faltered. And Elena? She knew she had them cornered. While the walls trembled inside, outside the building, Ava's grandmother was already stirring a storm. She had texted, called, and posted the moment she arrived. Within an hour, dozens of people gathered. Friends, neighbors, strangers who had seen too many headlines just like this one. Signs went up. Chants started. Justice for Ava. The crowd grew by the minute. Car horns blared in solidarity. Cell phones recorded every angle of the building. The grandmother stood tall at the front, voice booming like she was 30 years younger. They shot a deaf child. Are we going to let them silence us too? The roar that followed shook the glass doors. The officers inside shifted uneasily. The chief's empire wasn't just cracking. It was collapsing. Back inside, Elena demanded, play the footage now. The chief tried to stall. We'll review it in due process. But Elena slammed her hand against the desk so hard the pens rattled. Due process didn't protect my daughter from a bullet. Play. The tape. The IT officer swallowed hard, opened the system, and pulled it up. And then the truth filled the monitors. There was Ava, standing small and quiet in the dark. Her hands moved in frantic signs. Her lips mouthed the words, I'm deaf. There was King, barking commands she couldn't hear. And then the flash, the shot. Ava crumpling to the ground, blood staining the grass. The room went silent. Every officer who had blindly accepted the report now saw the lie unravel. The chief's jaw tightened. King's face turned pale. And Elena? She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stared at the screen with the kind of calm that was far more terrifying than rage. Because when the video ended, she turned slowly, pointed at King, and said, You tried to erase her. Now the world will erase you. News spread fast. The protest outside doubled, then tripled. Helicopters buzzed overhead. National outlets rolled their vans up the curb. The chief scrambled to contain it, but it was too late. Elena leaked the footage through channels only a former CIA officer would know how to use. By dawn, it was everywhere. King was suspended. The department launched an investigation. But the world already knew the truth. And yet, justice wasn't guaranteed. Because if you've lived in America long enough, you know the system isn't built to protect the Avas of the world, which is why Elena didn't rest. For weeks, she stood on courthouse steps, sat in hearings, faced down lawyers who twisted words, painted her daughter as a threat, a suspect, anything but a child shot for being different. But Elena never wavered. Every speech, every interview, every protest became bigger than Ava. It became about every child silenced, every mother left screaming, Every lie signed off in blue ink and filed away. And though she had once worked in shadows, Elena learned the power of standing in the light. Her grandmother by her side, Ava, recovering slowly, scarred but alive, holding her hand. They became unignorable. But here's the part that keeps me up at night. Just when the trial began to tilt against King, when the pressure on the department reached its breaking point, a sealed folder landed on Elena's doorstep. Inside, documents, names, numbers, proof that King wasn't alone, proof that what happened to Ava was an accident. It was part of something bigger, something darker. Elena stared at the papers, her hands trembling not with fear, but with fury, and she whispered the words that would change everything. This isn't just about my daughter anymore. It's about every child they thought they could silence. And that's where the real war began. The folder wasn't heavy, just a half-inch of paper, but the weight of it felt like 1,000 pounds. Elena flipped through the first page, and her pulse spiked. Names, not just King, other officers, other towns. A pattern of incidents swept under the rug. Victims labeled as non-compliant. Body cams disabled. Reports rewritten. Each page linked them together, like a playbook for erasing the truth. At the back of the folder was the worst piece, an unsigned memo from the state attorney's office. Cold, clinical language. Maintain narrative consistency. Avoid media exposure. Ensure officers are protected at all costs. It wasn't just King. It wasn't even just the chief. It was the system itself. Elena set the folder down, breathing slow and steady the way she had in interrogation rooms overseas. She knew what this meant. Her war wasn't over. It had just begun. She didn't keep it secret. Not this time. Elena brought the folder straight to her mother. The older woman adjusted her glasses, flipping page after page, her lips pressed tight. "They've been doing this for years," she said. "Decades." Ava, still weak but healing, leaned against the kitchen table. She traced the words with her fingers, as though seeing the proof for herself made it more real. She signed shakily. How many others? Elena answered out loud for her. Too many, and in that silence, a pact was formed. No more whispers, no more waiting for a court stacked against them. They would drag every name in that folder into the light. Elena knew better than to march into battle blind. She used her old skills, burner phones, encrypted lines, favors from contacts who still owed her from her agency days. She mapped the network. City councils, prosecutors, union reps, even judges. Every line pointed back to a circle of men who called themselves the Shield. Their purpose? Protect their own, no matter the cost. Her grandmother rallied the public while Elena worked in the shadows. Night after night, rallies outside the courthouse grew. Ava herself, frail but determined, began standing at the microphone, her hands signing as others voiced her words. They shot me because they didn't see me, but you will see me now. Crowds erupted. Hashtags trended. The city buzzed with a new kind of electricity. But the higher the fire burned, the more dangerous the opposition became. It happened late one night. Elena came home to find her front door ajar. Her stomach dropped. She moved like a ghost, silent, clearing each room with the precision of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. And then she saw it, on her kitchen counter, the folder, open, a single bullet resting on top. No note, no message, just a warning. Her grandmother's jaw tightened when she saw it. Ava froze, tears brimming in her eyes. But Elena only smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "They just told me they're scared," she said, "and fear makes them sloppy." The next morning, Elena marched into the courthouse with the bullet in her hand. Cameras swarmed. Reporters shouted. Officers stiffened at the sight of her. She held it high. "This," she said, voice cutting like a blade, "is what they left in my home. A message to silence me. But I don't scare. I don't run. And I don't stop." The crowd roared. Even inside the courthouse, jurors shifted uncomfortably, knowing the trial wasn't just about King anymore. It was about everything. King sat at the defense table, pale and sweating. The chief avoided Elena's gaze. The shield was crumbling. By the time the trial closed in on a verdict, Elena knew one thing. Whether King went to prison or not, the real battle lay beyond him. The folder was only the beginning. She had evidence of a network that spanned counties, states, maybe the whole country. She had leverage. She had allies. And now, she had a movement behind her. One night, long after Ava had gone to bed, Elena stood at the window. The city glowed outside, restless and awake. Her mother joined her, setting a hand on her shoulder. "You know what this means, don't you?" Elena nodded. "This isn't about one man, or one bullet. This is about dismantling the shield itself." And for the first time, Elena let herself whisper the words that burned in her chest. "If they want a war, I'll give them one." When I tell you I didn't sleep that night, I mean it. I stood at that window until the sun bled over the horizon. The city buzzing like it knew something was coming. War. Not the kind I fought in deserts overseas. Not the kind waged with drones and satellite maps. This was messier, dirtier, and more dangerous. Because the enemy wasn't across an ocean. They were right here, wearing suits, sitting on benches, smiling for cameras, and their name was a shield. So I made my first move. I didn't go back to the courthouse the next morning. I didn't wait for the trial's verdict. I sent my mother instead, holding Ava's hand so the cameras would stay on her. That way, no one noticed me disappearing, because I had a meeting. The informant. His name was Riley, ex-detective, once a rising star in the department, until he asked the wrong questions. He lost his badge, his pension, and nearly his life in a robbery gone wrong. Now he lived in shadows. And shadows were where I did my best work. We met in an abandoned warehouse, dust clinging to every beam of light that slipped through cracked windows. Riley's hand shook as he passed me a drive. "That folder you found," he whispered. "It's just surface level. The shield's bigger than you think." I leaned in. "How big?" He looked me dead in the eye. "They've got judges, senators. They own the unions, the press, half the damn prosecutors' offices. You take them on, you're not just fighting cops. You're fighting the state itself." I didn't blink. Good. Then I know exactly where to aim. The shadow game. For weeks, I dug deeper. Riley fed me files. My old CIA contacts slipped me intel. Debts they couldn't repay in any other way. I built a map. Connections favors blackmail material. Everywhere I looked, the shield's fingerprint were there. Cases dismissed. Officers quietly transferred after shootings. Families silenced with settlements. But the deeper I went, the more dangerous it got. Cars idled too long outside my house. My phone buzzed with block numbers. Empty silence on the other end. Ava's school called twice to say a stranger had been lingering by the gates. They weren't just watching me. They were watching her, the fire starter. That's when I made the choice. If they want to play in shadows, I dragged them into the light. I called a press conference downtown on the courthouse steps. By now, the protests had grown into thousands. Helicopters circled overhead. Reporters shoved microphones into my face. I held up Riley's files. "This," I said, voice booming over the crowd, "is proof that my daughter's shooting wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, a system designed to protect violent men and bury their victims." The crowd roared. Cameras flashed like lightning. And then I said the words that turned whispers into fire. They call themselves the Shield. And I swear to you, by my daughter's blood, I will tear it apart. The crowd erupted, shaking the very steps beneath my feet. Hashtags trended within minutes. Overnight, the Shield became a household phrase. And just like that, their shadows weren't safe anymore. Of course, they hit back. The next morning, headlines screamed, "Ex-CIA agent unstable. Mother exploiting daughter's tragedy." Fake footage leaked online, me supposedly taking bribes, me supposedly violent. Lies stacked on lies. But they made one mistake. They underestimated Ava. My daughter, frail but fierce, posted her own video, signing every word, her best friend voicing it over. My mother is not crazy. The Shield shot me. They tried to silence me. But I'm still here, and we won't stop. Within hours, her video had more views than all their hit pieces combined. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just my war anymore. It was everyone's. The betrayal. But here's the thing about wars. Sometimes a knife comes from behind. One night, Riley called me. His voice was frantic, broken. "They know about me. Elena, Gunshots cracked through the line. The call went dead. I rushed to his hideout, but by the time I got there, it was ash. Files burned. His body gone. No trace left. Only a message spray painted across the wall. Stop, or next is your daughter. The reckoning. I stood in that burned-out shell of a building, smoke choking my lungs, and I made a vow. They thought threats would make me back down. But every time they struck, every time they tried to scare me, they only gave me more fuel. I turned back to the fire, teeth clenched, fists tight, and I whispered the only promise I knew I'd keep. "You came for my daughter once. If you even breathe near her again, I will burn your shield to the ground." And in that moment, I knew the war had only just begun. The night was too quiet. In a cramped, safe house, Elena stood before a table littered with blueprints, phone records, and grainy photographs. Her body still bore the bruises from battles past, her ribs wrapped, her left hand trembling. But her eyes burned steady. This was it. Every step, every loss, every scar had led her here. The Shield wasn't just a cabal anymore. It was a disease, one that had spread through hospitals, police precincts, boardrooms, even churches. And tonight, she was going to cut it out at the root. She slipped a small recording device into her pocket. The last weapon she would ever need. "Elena," a voice whispered behind her. It was Ava. "What if this kills you?" Elena smiled faintly. "Then at least it kills them too." While Elena plotted in the shadows, another war was breaking in the light. The grandmother, frail in body, but a lion in spirit, stepped before the cameras in front of City Hall. Her voice cracked, but her words struck like thunder. "They told me to shut up. They told me to be quiet. They told me my granddaughter's death was an accident. Well, I'm done being quiet." The crowd roared. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands filled the streets. Handmade signs lifted skyward. "Justice for Ava. Expose the Shield. No more silence." What began as one grandmother's cry became a wildfire. The public was watching now. The Shield could no longer hide. And then Ava, the girl who had been silenced for so long, her body bearing invisible scars, now stood before the court. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew, stronger, sharper, unstoppable. "You tried to erase me. You told me I was weak, but I lived, and now the world will know your names." Every word was a blade cutting through the silence. Every sentence was a nail in the Shield's coffin. Some jurors wept openly. Reporters scribbled furiously. The Shield's lawyers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The spell of silence had been broken. That night, Elena made her move, while the world focused on Ava's testimony. Elena slipped into the Shield's last stronghold, a high-rise office lit like a shrine to power. She wasn't here to assassinate, not to vanish men in shadows. She was here to expose. Hidden cameras, live feeds, secure lines hacked and open to the world. As the Shield's leaders met to strategize their survival, their arrogance was broadcast across every major news station. The public saw it all. Their laughter at dead children, their dismissal of grieving families, their plans to bury evidence and bribe judges. The illusion shattered in real time. The Shield crumbled like a dying star. Some members tried to flee, only to find mobs at the gates. Others tried to fight, only to be betrayed by their own. And when federal agents finally stormed the building, there was no dignity left. The world watched as the Untouchables were dragged out in cuffs, their suits disheveled, their faces pale. Their empire of silence burned down in a single night. And in the middle of it all stood Elena, battered but unbowed, her recording device still running in her hand. She looked into the nearest camera, straight into millions of living rooms, and whispered, "Justice is not silent anymore." Weeks later, the trials began, but the outcome was never in doubt. With Ava's testimony, with Elena's evidence, with the grandmother's defiance, the Shield was finished. For the first time in decades, justice didn't feel like a performance. It felt real. It felt earned. The grandmother laid flowers at her granddaughter's grave, whispering, "They can't hurt you anymore, baby. We won." Ava, finally free, walked outside without fear. Her voice, once stolen, now echoed across the nation. And Elena, she disappeared back into the shadows, a ghost who had given the world one last gift. Some called her a hero, others called her dangerous. But to those who mattered, to Ava, to the grandmother, to the nameless victims finally seen, she would always be the woman who tore down a monster. The Shield was gone, and silence at last was broken. And so, the fall of the Shield is complete. But this story isn't just about Elena or Ava, or even the grandmother who refused to stay silent. It's about all of us. Because the truth is, systems of silence, corruption, and fear exist everywhere. They thrive not because they are powerful, but because too many people look away. Too many stay silent, convincing themselves it's safer not to fight. Elena's courage reminds us that justice only becomes real when ordinary people choose to act. The grandmother's strength shows us that even the most fragile voices can move nations when they refuse to be silenced. And Ava's journey is a warning and a promise that no matter how broken we feel, reclaiming our voice can spark revolutions. So I leave you with this. In a world where injustice often hides behind polished walls and powerful names, never forget that truth has a way of breaking through. And if one woman, one grandmother, and one survivor can shatter an empire's silence, imagine what we could all do together. If this story moved you, don't just let it end here. Stand with us. Share this video. Leave your thoughts below, and subscribe for more stories that expose the monsters hiding in plain sight. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we shine a light on the shadows. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay aware, and never stop fighting for the truth.